been doing booktube videos now for a little while, trying to build up this channel, but it occurred to me that I've never done the Booktube Newbie Tag, which I think it's traditional to do before you really start up your channel, so I thought I'd do it today. So I've printed a list of the questions out here that Booktube Newbie Booktubers have to answer. This was created, these questions on the Booktube Newbie Tag was originally created by Brenda C. On the 5th of February 2014, so that makes it more than 10 years ago now. The video that she did has since been unlisted, but the tag lives on in various iterations. So it's a series of 11 questions here, and I'm going to answer these questions one by one. So question one is, why did you start this channel? Well, I've done various YouTube videos over the years, but basically I just like to talk about certain things that I enjoy, but also of course I want to promote my own books. But I think it's more because I was drawn towards the booktube community because I watch a lot of booktubers, a lot of their videos, and sometimes you get reading recommendations from them, and I'll discover something, a great new read, or sometimes I hear people talking about books that are dear to my heart, and that's enjoyable too. So question two, what are some of the fun and unique things you can bring to booktube? Well, I suppose a unique aspect that I can bring to YouTube is probably idiocy, because I come from a long line of village idiots, so that, rest in mind there will be quite a bit of idiocy in my reviews, and also some comments on some good and bad whiskies out there, because I do enjoy my whiskey. In fact, my latest book, which is due out in February next year, 2025, February 2025, is called A Dark History of Whiskey, and hopefully the cover's floating up somewhere by you now, so that's out next year. What are you most excited about for this new channel? Well, I'd like to get in a lot of discussions with like-minded people, talk about certain authors, talk about certain books, and also discover new books. Question 4, why do you love reading? Well, I don't want to be facetious about this answer, so why do I love reading? I think because when you're really into a good book, when you're really enjoying the story, when you live in the story, the experience you get, you can't get anywhere else. It's like when people say, oh, the film is never as good as the book. That's because the experience of reading the book gives you so much more, because you've got to use your own imagination so much more than you have when watching a film or a TV series or whatever. When you're reading, you've got to fully engage, and when the writer does the job well and it's well written and the descriptions are there and it's paced right, wow, there's nothing else like it in the world, except maybe sex. Other than sex, I think it's my favourite thing in the world. No, other than sex and whiskey, I think reading's my favourite thing in the world. Question 5. What book or series got you into reading? Well, when I was a kid, I always read comics. But I started, my grandfather used to read a lot of Western books, Western paperbacks, which was, a lot of men of his generation did. And these were violent books, and I used to sometimes borrow one of his paperbacks or his library books, and I'd read it. And one day I discovered the series Edge by George G. Gilman, and these were billed as adult westerns. They were corny, but they were great. They were excellent stories, and there are many books in this series. You've got number 5, Blood on Silver. Number 13, A Town Called 8. That's Adam Steele, actually, but which was written by the same author. Savage Dawn, The Prisoners. There are many. I think there was 61 Edge books in total. Now, I've got a link to the Edge series, which I'm really proud of. As I say, as a kid, I was a massive fan of Edge. There was a shop local to me in Tonopandi called the Wishing Well, and it had shelves full of cheap paperbacks. You know, paperbacks in those days used to cost anywhere from 70 pence to £1.25. And I quite often, during the summer, during school in the summer, I'd bunk off school. Some people call it mitching, skipping school, whatever you want to call it. I'd do it on my own with a paperback in my pocket, and I'd go down the woods, and I'd find a tree to sit in. I'd climb a tree and I'd sit in that tree reading that book all day. But in later life then, I actually became part of this series that I was obsessed with as a kid, and I'm still very proud of it. I became friends with the writer, George G. Gilman. His real name was Terry Arknett. In fact, the pen name George G. Gilman was something of a joke, because when he was trying to think up a pen name, when he started writing the Edge books in the early 70s, he used the initials of a child name for an horse, Gigi. So he became George G. Gilman. But anyway, I became friends with Terry Arknett, and at that point I was known as a Western writer myself. I published several Westerns for Robert Ale Limited in the Black Horse Western range. These were hardcover books aimed primarily at the library trade. Here are just two of my Westerns, Wild Bill Williams and The Ballad of Delta Rose, written by the name Jack Martin, under the name Jack Martin. Jack Martin, of course, was my grandfather's name, and as I mentioned when I first started talking about the Edge books, I used, my grandfather was a fan of Westerns, and that's why when I started writing Westerns, I used the name Jack Martin. Not only because my own name Gary Dobbs doesn't sound Western enough, but Jack Martin sounds like a cool name for Westerns, but also it was in tribute of my grandfather. But my connection to Edge was that by the time I got to know Terry Arknett, that's George Gilman, he was elderly, and the Edge books had been out of print for a great many years. So I brought Edge back into print by republishing the first of the Edge books, Edge the Loner, on the Kindle. I was responsible for editing it, putting it together, formatting it as an ebook, and I'm now actually part of this Western series that I was obsessed with when I was a kid, and I'll tell you more about that one day in a future video. I only did the first one, The Loner. After that, someone else took over, and well, they didn't do a very good job, let's see. Another writer who I used to love when I was a kid that I've got a connection with is Leslie Charteris of the Saint fame, of course. I loved Leslie Charteris's books when I was a kid, and I got the chance in this edition of The Saint in New York, which were reissues of the old books. This one came out in 2013, and I'm very honoured to have had the chance and been asked by Ian to write the introduction to this book. So on this cover here you've got Leslie Charteris with an introduction by Gary Dobbs, so that actually gives me a connection to The Saint, which was, and that's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I'll read you a little bit from my introduction. It was Roger Moore, you know, who gave me my first experience with the debonair, buckering, nearing gentleman we know as the Saint. Those TV episodes, though broadcast in black and white, were likely the most colourful things in my young life. They introduced me to the world of adventure, of excitement, of dastardly, devilish plots and incredible heroics. I was only 4 years old when the ITC TV series ended, so I was getting my thrills several years after the fact with the reruns. It never mattered to me that this was an old series, since the best shows are never really reruns. Each time they are shown, they come to life with their freshness and impeccable storytelling. Somehow they become new again. That's just the opening to my introduction to The Saint in New York, this edition here. I'm really, really, really proud to have written that introduction. So, next question. I just need to have a puff on my vape here, which just kept me from smoking. I was an heavy smoker, a chronic smoker. I was going through about 50 cigarettes a day. For the last 5 years I haven't smoked thanks to my vape. So question 6 is, what question would you ask your favourite booktubers? I think it'd be, how do you get all those subscribers? Because I need to do that. Question 7, what challenges do you think starting a booktube channel will be the hardest to overcome? Well, I suppose it'll be keeping things interesting, and also being aware that everyone likes their own thing, and sometimes I can be obsessed with a series, a book series or whatever, and my enthusiasm for that series might tend to run away with me. And also because I've been obsessed with that series, I might have a lot of knowledge about that series that people watching the video will not necessarily have. So I think that that'll probably be a big challenge, to keep things interesting, to try and inspire some people to try this series and perhaps, you know, become as obsessed with it as I am, without sounding boorish. Question 8. When did you start reading? Poof. As far back as I can remember, I read. When I was growing up in the 70s, we only had 3 TV channels here in the UK. We didn't have computers, we didn't have the internet, you know, we didn't have the internet when I was an adult. So we had comic books, and I always read comic books because they allowed me to escape. Where do you read? I read in work, because my job sometimes I've got to drive quite a few miles between clients, and sometimes I've got to wait for a time slot, so I might have an hour spare, so I'll park up in the lay-by somewhere and I read. I read at home. I've got a chair there in the corner of my office with my reading lamp, really comfortable. I like to sit down in that chair and read, but by far my favourite place to read, and it always has been since I was a kid, is in the bath. Honestly, when I was a kid, I'd run a bath, I'd lay in the bath, and I'd read my comic book, my weekly comic books. These days, I'll run a bath, and my wife's shouting up after an hour, "Have you drowned?" Because I'm lying in a bath, constantly letting water out, and as it gets cold, and putting more in and more in to warm it up, and reading my book. I love reading in a bath. That's why I don't like showers much. I only have a shower if I'm in a rush. I prefer a bath. What kind of books do you like to read? There is no one kind of books. I read multi-genre. I read non-fiction. As I say, I write both fiction and non-fiction, so I'm widely read. I think probably the majority of my reading in terms of fiction is probably in the crime and thriller genre, but I read a heck of a lot of westerns. Lately I've read a lot of historical adventure stories, stuff like Bernard Cromwell. I've read a lot of that, and Matthew Arthurty and the Viking books and things like that, so I read a wide variety of things. So that's more or less my video for my Booktube Newbie Tag. There's just one more question, but before I do that, please, as I say, I'm a new booktuber, so if you wouldn't mind giving me a subscribe so I can build this channel up. Leave a comment below, let me know, you know, what type of books you like, if you agree with anything I've said, and also give this video a like. So the last question here, and it's in brackets here, it says sometimes done, so not everyone does this, but it says, what does your book collection look like? Well, it's kind of messy, but it looks like this.